This is Cinema Creep episode 4, RE-MANIAC, and I'm going to slate it. Wait, that was weak. There you go.
I got a man slate, so I'm not embarrassed later.
Yeah, I just cried during editing. Okay, and here we go. 3, 2, 1. How's it going, creeps? Welcome to Cinema Creep, a Black Mass Films podcast where we dissect all things vile, disgusting, and downright terrifying in the world of horror cinema. I am Justin James, and today I am joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Andrew Henderson.
What's up, guys?
So we have made it to episode 4, Andrew.
We have.
Yeah.
It's a celebratory time.
Yes.
4 episodes.
Yep. So before we dive too far into this, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Everblack Coffee. If you want to drink the same coffee we're drinking right now, because it is actually 1:30 a.m. While we're recording this, go to everblackcoffee.com and pick up a bag for yourself. It is ethically sourced, premium quality coffee with a dark twist, and it is absolutely amazing. So, Andrew, how have you been this week? What have you been watching? What's going on over at the Henderson household?
Life is great. Family's healthy, happy, and yeah, you can't ask for more than that, guys. I mean, especially during this crazy time in the world, I hate to hear if any of you guys are on hard times, but hopefully we're here for you to help you guys be entertained. But life is good over at the Henderson household, and man, it's just waiting to get back out there and shoot some films.
Yep.
How are you and the family? How you guys doing?
Same. Doing well. Still working full time. And raising a 10-month-old, but she's healthy. Katie's healthy. I'm healthy, so all good. I know there's a lot of people that have it 1,000 times worse than we do right now. So,
yep. So let's go ahead and let's hop into some horror talk here. So I watched some interesting things this week, Justin. But the one I want to talk about is it's a pretty known horror film, it is one of the staples for people that watch horror. Now I know from talking to some of the people that I know personally that listen to this podcast, a lot of them are maybe getting into more obscure horror or just getting into less mainstream horror. But if you're a horror hound or a horror fan, Justin, then this is definitely a staple. It's something that you will stumble upon when you start looking at more B-movie horror films, right?
Yep.
And I'm talking about the timeless classic from 1987 called Street Trash. So guys, Street Trash is a film that was kind of on the tail end of the Grindhouse period, right? So you get a lot of that Grindhouse sleaze, a lot of that Grindhouse look. I mean, it was shot in New York City in the 1980s, the tail end of the 80s, like I said, 87. So you get that grittiness that New York, was facing at the time.
That New York sleaze.
That New York sleaze state of mind. So it only had a budget of $500,000. So you definitely, that adds to it with the amount of, the kind of talent you bring into the film, because you're getting more real world type of people in there instead of your Hollywood A-listers and stuff like that. But this was directed by James Murrow, and it was written by Roy Fromks. I don't know how the hell to say his last name. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. Don't know why I'm even putting an accent on it. It's Frumkes. I don't know much about that dude other than his association with Street Trash, so forgive me if he is some major guy that I should know about, but sorry, don't. So the synopsis of this is a liquor store owner sells alcoholic beverages to homeless people, And unaware of what the bottles actually contain, they contain a toxic brew called Viper. This causes those that drink it to melt into neon liquids. I mean, that already has me sold, right? So two homeless lads find themselves up against the effects of the toxic brew, as well as going head to head with Bronson, who is a Vietnam vet with sociopathic tendencies, and he is also the owner of a junkyard there in New York City where all the homeless people have called home. So they all live in this junkyard, and they all walk around getting drunk on this toxic liquor called Viper, and it's making people go crazy, and people, when they drink it, they melt from the insides out into these neon liquids. Pretty fucking gnarly. This is a film that is disgusting. It's vile. It fits the 5-star rating here at Black Mass Films and Cinema Creep. It will make you feel uncomfortable because it has some nasty sort of gratuitous sex scenes that will make you feel uncomfortable, that and the classism that you see in this film, but it all mimics real life, and that's why it's so just gritty and disgusting and makes you step back and be like, man, people are kind of fucked. But yeah, so I really enjoy it. Justin, I don't know what your take on street trash is. You got a hot take on this?
I love street trash. It's one of those just, sleazy late 80s New York kind of films, and I will say this would make the ultimate triple feature. So if you guys are familiar or new to this film, I highly suggest a triple feature with Street Trash, Troma's Class of Nukem High, and Chud.
Yes.
That is like just the ultimate trilogy right there.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to sit down and watch something with your kids this weekend, there's your triple feature.
Yes, definitely. That'll introduce your children to horror.
Do not do that. Don't. Do not do that. Please do not. Rent them Scoob.
Yeah.
Start them
but
with
if you
Scoob,
do,
and then
we then warned you afterwards not to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unless you're going to give them some Viper, do not let them watch Street Trash.
I don't suggest doing that either.
Yeah. Nah.
Okay, so one thing I've watched this week, it's not exactly a film. So there's a dude on YouTube. His name is Sean Clark, but his YouTube channel is Malfunction. So it's like malfunction, but instead of TION at the end, it's SEAN. So the guy, he said that back in like 94, 95, somewhere like that, he was reading an interview with John Carpenter in a magazine, and he name dropped one of the streets that they filmed for Halloween. So he said this struck with him, it made him realize that he can go and see these places for himself. So he started a series called Horror's Hallowed Grounds. And a lot of these episodes are, it's like shot like a documentary. He's got like a, small, like bare bones crew, and they go around and they go to all of these filming locations from famous horror films and make like a little documentary featurette kind of thing. And they've actually been featured on quite a lot of, special editions of some of these horror films. Like his Halloween featurette was featured on the 25th anniversary DVD or something like that. But he typically uploads like stuff about his horror collection. He's got a massive horror collection on YouTube. But since we're all under lockdown and stuff, he's been uploading every episode of Horror's Hallowed Grounds to YouTube. So I've been watching those. Some of them, he gets actual people from the cast and crew of these films, and they come and do like a little walk along interview with them and go revisit some of these filming locations. Today I watched the original Nightmare on Elm Street house, and they actually got to go in. And then I also watched the Halloween 5 filming locations, and he actually got Don Shanks, who played Michael Myers in that film, to go around with him. And they talked about production and stuff. So it's pretty cool. Check out Malfunction or Sean Clark on YouTube.
Hey, where's he from, Justin? Do you have any idea?
I think he's from California.
Oh, well, shout out to Malfunction. I don't know anything about this guy, but I will be subscribing because it sounds gnarly, and I will definitely be hitting that notification bell for you, Sean. So if you ever listen to this, you got two big supporters here.
Yep.
Hit us up. We'd love to have you on the podcast at some time.
Yep.
So movie-wise.
Have you watched anything else, or you want my actual film pick?
Well, I know we both watched the same movie, and I don't want to get into that yet, but I want your film pick.
Okay, so the film I watched by myself this week was 2017's Mayhem. I watched this on Shudder. It's directed by Joe Lynch, stars Steven Yeun, most notably Glenn from The Walking Dead, and Samara Weaving from The Babysitter. So this film is just all out fun. It's bloody. It's violent. Basically, Steven Yeun plays a white-collar dude. He gets fired, and as he's being walked out of the office building, the CDC shows up and quarantines the place because this virus has taken over the whole building and is making people do crazy shit, because at the beginning they explain that the virus is precedented. A dude gets it and he murders someone and he walks in court because that's what the virus does, is it makes you do these crazy things. So basically Steven Yeun uses this as, hey, I'm going to make my way up the ladder and talk to the board of directors and get my job back. So there's lots of blood, lots of fighting, killing. It's a good time. It's very much Fight Club meets Shaun of the Dead.
I mean, you got Steven Yeun in it too, so I mean, it's fucking. I mean, if nothing else, dude's a spectacular actor. I like him a lot. So
yep. So check out Mayhem. It's on Shudder. Okay, do you want to dive into this? The one
Yes.
we both watched.
Let me preface this with an apology, a public apology. So, was it episode 2 or was it episode 3 where I was looking favorably upon this?
I don't remember, but it was
anyways,
an episode or 2 ago.
Anyways, I was talking about the show on Shudder called The Core, which is rad. You should definitely watch it. But there's an episode with Glenn Danzig from the Misfits, and I said he was talking about turning his graphic novels into a short film or a TV anthology, and I was like, man, that sounds so fucking rad. I cannot wait to see what he comes up with. And little, unbeknownst to me, right? Because this I knew that Core episode was from 2016. I didn't know that Glenn Danzig already had filmed this directorial debut called Verotica, based upon his comic anthology. So I am sorry, because what we are going to say here goes against everything that I originally thought that this could potentially be. Justin, you can have it from there.
Yeah, so this was, we usually try to keep it honest here, but also being respectful, right? And this hurts to say because Andrew and I are both very big Misfits fans, and I've always been a big Glenn Danzig fan.
I would say that we are 138.
We are 138.
We are 138.
So, being that we are in the Fiend Club, this is definitely painful. This film, we both paid $5 to rent this. I have never been so pissed off that I have spent $5 in my entire life.
I was pretty mad.
Yeah, so this was written, directed, partially filmed, I'm pretty sure partially edited, and scored by Glenn Danzig himself. To let you know how we really feel, in our show notes, it says Verotica, 2019, written and directed by Glenn Danzig. Seriously, though, what the fuck?
That is essentially the thought here, right? So I'm going to break it down real quick, Justin, a little bit, and just get some of your takes, right? Because I want more or less, I want to ask you questions about this, right?
Okay.
So we know that this is based upon the graphic novels, and it is in 3 parts, right? He bases it on 3 different characters. So if you want to talk just real quick about each of the stories, just so people know what is awesome about them and what's shitty about them, I would love to hear it, because you started out watching this and then you convinced me to watch it because you didn't want to be alone having seen this. You didn't want to be scarred by yourself. So you're like one of those people that's a victim and you want other people to be a victim.
Yeah,
so
I had to drag
okay.
you down with me.
So can you give me a brief overview about, what it is?
Okay, so like you said, it's an hour and a half, and it's in 3, it's basically 3 short films. So it's a typical horror anthology. And you've got your kind of crypt keeper character in between, like explaining to you the stories or whatever. So the first story is literally, I'm just going to speed through these, and as crazy as the details sound to you, you're thinking, no way, there's no way this film is about that. Go watch it. Go waste your own $5 and you'll see.
Go waste your own $5.
Yeah.
Because we wasted 10.
Yeah, so this movie starts out, the first story, basically the woman has eyeballs for fucking nipples. Yes, you heard that correct. And she cries from them, and a teardrop hits this little albino spider that's crawling like next to her, and her teardrop makes it turn into like this big, terrible costumed like albino 8-armed spider dude who just goes around raping women in the ass and breaking their necks. Literally, that is the entire story. And then he's gunned down by the police. The end.
Wait a second. So he is not paraphrasing here. That is literally the story beats. It is not from like nothing building up to this. This is literally, guess what? I got nipples that have eyeballs. Oh, there's a mutated spider. And then all of a sudden he's raping women and doing that. And then the thing gets killed.
Yeah.
And oh my God.
Yeah.
Justin.
So the second one I can explain even quicker. So the second one is basically a terrible ripoff of the classic film, The Eyes Without a Face. So basically this stripper who goes by the name of Mystery Girl, I think it's not woman, it's Mystery Girl. She's got scars on her face, so to hide them, she goes around and kills women that she deems to be pretty and takes their faces and wears them. So basically she gets found out by the cops chase her, they shoot her, she escapes, and literally the film ends with her. She has now moved states or cities or whatever, and now she's working as a stripper at another strip club. The end.
Yes. Now, I just want to throw in one thing before we move on.
I know where you're going.
Yes, you do. So, the practical effects in this, shout out to the SFX team because they used as many practical effects as they could. Maybe it was a budgetary thing, but this did have a budget of $1 million. You know, compared to Street Trash's $500,000, which I would rather watch Street Trash 500 times over again than this ever a second viewing. Regardless, they go in the second story and cut the main character cuts the faces off of her victims to essentially wear their faces, and it is so blatantly obvious that they're using some sort of deli meat over the faces for a practical effect. It looks like deli meat. It's got to be,
does.
right?
I almost expected in the credits when it rolls and shows like the special effects department, I expected it to say special effects by Arby's.
Shout out to
they got the
shout
meats.
out to Arby's. Yeah. Ken's Deli for the deli meat wrangler.
Yeah, so that's literally that one. So the third installment is basically an Elizabeth Bathory ripoff. This is where most of the budget was spent, I'm imagining, because there are horses. And it's basically this woman who's like the Contessa of Blood or something like that. And she goes around and she picks a virgin, which she pronounces it Virgin. And she bathes in their blood to preserve her youth and beauty. And apparently that warrants a 10-minute long shot of her staring at herself in the mirror. And that's literally the story. There's a really bad beheading in that. The special effects are terrible. There's CGI fire. There's a CGI green screen floor. The only cool thing about the third part to me, and it's not even like it made the film good, but if any of you know who Kansas Bowling is, she's a filmmaker I've actually followed for a while because she has a unique story. So at 16 years old, she wrote a film called BC Butcher. I'm not the biggest fan of that film either, but, you know, she made a film. So at 17, she made the film. She got Troma to distribute the film, and she found her way into Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And she plays the main virgin in this third short film in Veronica. And basically the whole point of Danzig putting her in this film was, hey, you're Kansas Bowling. I'm going to make you get naked and hang from chains in this bloodbath thing. And that's it. So
yeah, he's like, hey, will you do this for $30,000? Okay.
Yep. So
I don't know what he paid her. I'm just saying.
But so I mean, it's cool. Kansas Bowling's doing things. Shout out to her. But the rest of this film, just straight up garbage. Directorial decisions are terrible. Cinematography decisions are terrible. Every shot fades to black.
See, here's the problem, guys, is like, if Danzig offered you the opportunity to be on his film, right? Like, at what point are you allowed to speak up and be like, Mr. Danzig, sir, that's a bad decision, or Mr. Danzig, sir, can we increase the budget here for the special effects makeup? Do you say that, or are you like, no, Danzig is fucking, that's a horror icon, I cannot say anything? Or like, what do you say to like help him preserve his image, right? Like his public image. Like, would you speak up, Justin, or would you just be like, okay, let's put baloney on our face?
I would. I'd be like, dude, you need to go sit down and watch every episode of Film Riot right now, because this dude, as much as a horror, aficionado or whatever he may be, he's very knowledgeable about the genre. The essentials and basics of filmmaking is what really, I mean, the story of this, like, to be honest, the story sucked too, but even further than that, there were things that just took me out of the film. Like, I felt like I was watching a parody of filmmaking. Like, some of the camera movements, there are scenes where it lingers, like there's a makeout scene and sex scenes and stuff that lasts way too long. And, it's almost like you can tell that the characters were done delivering their lines, and Danzig never called cut. He's like, wait, just keep rolling, we might get something. And the actor's just like, oh, okay. And they just keep going. And it's like a awkward zoom in on the character's face and then a zoom out. And then it's like every scene, no matter whether the sequence is 10 seconds or 3 minutes, they fade to black and then hard jump into the next one. So there's just a lot of, like, everything is wrong with this film. Like, I can't even think of a good thing. The special effects, we give them a shout out for doing practicals, but even the practicals sucked, given that, in the third short film, there's a woman hanging upside down, and like this, the main villain or whatever she is, she slits the girl's throat, and blood starts gushing out, and you're like, okay, cool. Well, then you notice, like, you can see the tube in the back of her neck, like on the back of her neck, that's coming around under the prosthetics. And then the girl that slashed her throat starts like pressing on the back of the actress's neck to make more blood squeeze out. So it's like everything is just terrible and not thought through. Like when Kansas Bowling is hanging naked in the tub of blood, like she's supposed to be chained up, but she's literally just holding the chains. Like, so the chains are hanging straight down, and for you video, like the viewers right now, her arms are up like this, and she's holding on to the chains. And this is just fucking terrible. This is probably the single worst film I've ever seen. It is the Room of horror.
So here's the thing, Justin. That's the greatest comparison for it. So here's the thing, Justin, is in 2020 or 2019, when this was actually made, there is no excuse to deliver a film of this caliber. Like, if you see me looking off screen, if you guys are watching the video, I just have Street Trash playing over here off screen, and I keep glancing over at it, and it is not the epitome of a fucking A+ horror, A+, like, it is not a case study for horror, but just looking at the practical effects that they delivered on a minuscule budget in 1987 compared to like what a horror icon Glenn motherfucking Danzig, did in 2020 with $1 million. It's like, what are you thinking, bro?
Yeah, and like the thing is too, if you watch interviews, like, he is proud of this film, which more power to him. Like, I'm not trying to tear the guy down, I'm not the kind of person that wants to, like, I don't want to sit here and talk so bad about it that Danzig ever hears this podcast. What are the odds? But ever hears this podcast and he's sitting at home like crying about it and genuinely upset. Like, that's not the goal here. It's not to hurt anybody's feelings or belittle someone's work, because I mean, they worked hard on it. Like, they made a film, right? But
did they?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, for someone though to be so knowledgeable in this genre, I was so excited to watch this.
So excited
and
too.
It was so bad. Like, even we're just ignoring story because that's subjective. Like, story stuff is completely subjective. But when it comes to filmmaking, there are like, yeah, you know, you don't have to go by this certain playbook, but there are certain like basics, right, that you learn when you first start making films. And this movie like ignored all of them. And this is one of those, you know, sometimes you can break the rules, but to break the rules, you need to know the rules and why they exist. This was just, what the fuck are rules?
Look, art is art. Like you said, art is subjective. A film is a film. You know, you can put it out there and it's art, right? It exists. But the problem is everybody can make a film. Everybody can make art. That doesn't necessarily mean that it should be made or it should be good. I have no fucking business building a house. I know what a nice house looks like. But that doesn't mean that I need to pick up a hammer and go spend $1 million building somebody a home and expect people to enjoy it. You know, like it's the same thing here. It's like you can have all the horror cinema knowledge in the world, but if you can't apply that, you know, to actually, you know, real life filmmaking, you know, I mean, at some point you're just gonna be like, yeah, you know, I love horror films. I should not be making horror films, right? It's okay.
Yep.
You know, it's all about, you know, knowing yourself and being real with yourself. You know, like I said, you know, I you know, there's a lot of men that they equate their manliness to carpentry skills. Guys, I will pay somebody in a heartbeat to come do some carpentry skills. I'm just throwing that out there. Not something I've ever spent time on because guess what? I'm a filmmaker.
Yep.
So,
Joe Bob Briggs says so.
Right. We all have separate skill sets. I just don't think filmmaking in that aspect is Danzig's. I think that man has amazing ideas. I think he's an amazing musician.
He's a hell of a graphic artist.
Yeah, I don't think that translates over into filmmaking. Or he just made a bunch of bad decisions.
Yep.
All right. So that's our take on Veronica. What's up?
Yeah. Well, so real quick, we're going to cut away to a commercial. But before we do that, I want to have a little fun here. I'm going to search for Veronica on YouTube. And I want to read one comment. Just one.
I want you to find two comments, Justin. Comments. I want you to find us a good comment, and then I want you to find us a bad comment. Let's give it a fair shake.
Okay, so let's see here.
You find the bad comment. I'll find the good comment.
Okay, good luck.
I'm searching right now.
Oh, I found a good one, though.
Did you find a good comment?
Yeah. It was cheesy, B-rated entertainment to me. I enjoyed it.
Okay, so does that mean I get to find the bad comment?
Yeah, let's both find a bad comment.
What?
You go ahead.
Let me see. What did you look under? Did you just go to like the trailer? I'm gonna look under the trailer.
Yeah.
The comments under the trailer. Let me see. This person says, I've seen porno movies more cinematic than this one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I actually found another good one, so you can find one more bad one.
Okay. What you got?
Okay, so this person says, this film isn't as bad as everyone says it is. It feels like a Roger Corman quality production. Bullshit. With more time, funds, and input, more could have been visually developed. I could make a specific critique, but I'd rather save time. I also look forward to more from him. As a high note, I liked some of the experimental lighting that felt a little like Stuart Gordon's lighting rigs. No. Good use of Black Aria in The Last Tale. Spoiler, perhaps this creates an element of comedy, but the very bane of Drakija, which is the last story, would be a night burglar that winds up in a room and gets in an orgy to save them all from her, officially conquering the dragon. Yeah, see...
that one spanned on way too long.
Yeah, it did, just like the film.
So... If we have any filmmakers out there that are listening to this, you guys both know that me and Justin are horror filmmakers. We're big gearheads. We've talked about it before. So, you know, when stuff is visually a letdown, it kind of kills it for us. I mean, you know, story's key, but obviously when you're a cinematographer, camera operator, or videographer in any, or photographer in any aspect, you know, you can automatically disassociate with art when the images come off as amateurish, just like in Verotica. So this guy comments, and Justin, here's one for both of us. I think this is where we should end this. It says, the IMDb claims that it was shot on an ARRI Alexa, more like a 1999 Sony Handycam with ARRI Alexa scrolled across it in crayon. So
that's perfect. How's it going, creeps? One quick mid-episode break to tell you a little more about our sponsor. Since 2016, Everblack Coffee Company has delivered exceptional single-origin coffee and high fives all over the world. They understand that a cup of coffee is so much more than something you drink. That's why they source their beans from farms that only use fair trade and organic growing practices. When you buy coffee from Everblack, you can be certain that you're getting the highest quality coffee available by ethical means only. It's time to start looking at coffee differently. Head over to everblackcoffee.com and grab a bag for yourself. It's deliciously dark. Now back to the show. So, welcome back. Now, I know that last segment we were totally being Debbie Downers and tearing a film apart. So, this next part, you will be pleased to know, we are going to talk very highly of a film. Actually, this film falls into a couple of films. It falls into the category that usually I would still be talking negative about, and that is remakes. Because this was originally going to be an episode all about remakes, and this was on the list. And we were like, no, this one is good. Let's do an entire episode on it. So, do you want to usher us in to the main event, Andrew?
Yes, I do. So, today we are going to be talking about the remake of Maniac. And if you guys have ever seen the original Maniac, it is very entertaining. It stars Joe Spinell, and it is a great movie unto its own. So let's talk a little bit about the story. So the story of Maniac is about a psychotic man who had a harsh upbringing. He lives in New York City and is on the hunt for women and their scalps. He resides in a tiny apartment with a bunch of female mannequins as friends. One day he meets a photographer named Anna and believes she may be the perfect woman. Does that mean that he'll finally stop killing once he has met her? You're going to have to watch the movie to find out if you haven't seen it. So that's the synopsis for the original. And this movie, Justin, came out in
1980.
1980, yeah, you're right. So this was right in that seedy era of horror, and again, coming right there in that grindhouse period, again in New York City, just like Street Trash that we talked about earlier. And that's what initially drew me to this film. So this is one of those films that when I started seriously getting into horror, that this was one of the first ones that I saw that was not a mainstream horror film. And no,
I do want to point out that while this isn't extremely mainstream, it is a very famous film, and it is a classic slasher, but it's not as mainstream as other slasher films because this is very very raw and gritty, the original.
True that. And it is not a horror film in the sense that, you have somebody like Mr. Voorhees, or not even something like this was never really pushed like movies like Black Christmas and stuff like that were back in the day, right? This was always more of a character driven serial killer type of film.
Right. It's very much because we've talked, this was that era, like coming right out of exploitation. This was a very exploitation style film, given like the just the visuals and the some of the gore gags. This wasn't your typical blockbuster film because of that.
Right, for sure. So like I said, it stars Joe Spinell. He was a
He also co-wrote it.
Yeah, he also co-wrote it. And I guess we can give a shout out real quick. Directed by Bill Lustig and written by C.A. Rosenberg and Joe Spinell. Starred Joe Spinell and Carolyn Monroe. Carolyn Monroe was also in. She was in Slaughter High, I believe. But Joe Spinell, when he took on this role, he was sort of in. I want to say like he was in the midway point of his career, right? Like he'd already done some big stuff. Like I think he was in Rocky
Taxi
before
Driver.
this, right? Yeah, he was in secondary roles, but this was I don't want to say this was a big role for him at the time, because I don't think it became a big role for him until later on, especially now. This film has a huge cult following, right? But
Right.
you know, he was
Rest in peace, by the way, Joe
yeah,
Spinell.
Joe Spinell. He was great at the roles that he took. I wouldn't say overall a great actor, but I would say he was perfect for the roles that he played. And he
was a character actor.
right, he sure was, and he would play those roles that were like thugs and crooked cops, and you know, he was typecast, right? But the roles he would play that he was cast for were, you know, exceptional. He did an amazing job with them. But yeah, so this movie, amazing. The great Tom Savini has a role in this movie. Justin, you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, so if you ever want to see Tom Savini getting blown, then just watch Maniac. There's a scene. This is not the kind of film you're going to watch with your family and friends. I mean, some of your friends maybe, if your friends are like us. There's a scene where Tom Savini's playing like a disco dude.
Disco boy.
And he's disco boy. And he's got him like a disco gal. I think they called him Stella's back in the day or something like that. Not up to date on my disco lingo.
Apparently
sorry,
not.
but
I have no fucking clue what you're talking about.
yeah, so they pull over, you know, they go to the back seat or whatever. And Joe Spinell's just creeping on him, and then they're finally gonna drive away because the girl sees Joe Spinell and she's like, "We gotta get out of here." Yeah.
Wait. I want to talk about how he's creeping on him and what he's doing as he's watching him. I just want you to talk about that because it is fucking like frightening.
The nose,
Yes.
the nose
Yes.
thing. Yeah. So he's like wiping his nose. So they're in the back seat, and Tom Savini's back is to the window. Joe Spinell's looking through, and he just starts like wiping his nose across the window. And it's just nasty.
So
and
weird.
I mean, Joe Spinell, if you don't know, you know, he's kind of, you know, he's not like, I wouldn't say overweight, but he's, you know, he's got what you girls now today call the dad bod.
Straight dad bod.
And straight dad bod. And he's got like the porn star mustache and like greasy black hair, and his skin always looks like he's sweating. So he's just a really, like, they made him look gross for this film. That's the point.
He could be related to Ron Jeremy.
He could, like, he's very Ron Jeremy-esque in this film. So she sees him doing that, and she's like, "I gotta go, or we gotta get out of here." And Tom Savini doesn't see him. So they go to drive away, and as soon as Tom Savini turns on the headlights, Joe Spinell's standing in the headlights with like this wide-eyed, crazy, like, maniac look, if you will. And he runs on top of the hood of the car and blows Tom Savini's head off
With a shotgun.
And it is a beautiful shot.
Listen, guys, this is one of the coolest kill scenes in horror history. Like, I mean, it may not be number one, but it is definitely in my top 10. I just love it because the way that they show Disco Boy, with its Tom Savini's character, his head explode from the shotgun blast. It's in slow motion, and you just see it. Like, again, this is Tom Savini's magic work here, you know, like you just see just his head exploding, and you see just all the fragments of skull and just brain matter and gore just exploding in the car as it's
dripping all over the back seat and just,
oh yeah, it's
But so the reason that we're talking about Maniac, you know, some of you are thinking this film came out in 1980, the remake was 2012. Well, I feel like remakes are a thing. They're very controversial in the horror world, right? Most remakes
suck.
Especially in the horror community. You know, Rob Zombie's Halloween, in my opinion, they were terrible.
Fright Night?
The Child's Play remake. Fright Night? What the fuck was that remake? Colin Farrell?
Come on. Yeah, no. What
Colin
the fuck?
Farrell? No, the original Fright Night is like one of my favorite vampire flicks ever.
it's the GOAT.
And then I don't even like saying, oh yeah, I love Fright Night, because a lot of people don't even know about the OG Fright Night, so they automatically go to like the Colin Farrell. You know, the Colin Farrell Fright Night made me think more of what's that film about the little boy who befriends the vampire?
You know
what I'm talking about? It's got the dude from Stuart Little in it.
Are you talking about what the hell's the name of that movie? I don't know. I'm drawing a blank.
The little is it the little
monsters?
Vampire?
Little monsters?
No, it's the little vampire. That's what it's called. Yeah. That's the vibe I got from it.
It was fucking weak sauce. Like, guys, I mean, like I said, there's times that you want to tear apart a movie and times you don't. Like, I mean, I'd be hard pressed.
I would still watch the Colin Farrell Fright Night before I would watch Veronica again.
I would be hard pressed. Yeah, like that's what I was gonna say. I would watch Friday Night before Veronica, but oh man, we're gonna do a vampire episode. We've got to. I already know what my favorite vampire movie is, but I don't want to discuss that here. Maniac, right, Justin? So remakes suck in general, but there are a few good gems out there, and one of our collective favorite remakes ever for horror cinema is the 2012 Maniac remake with Elijah Wood.
Yes, and I would actually venture to say that this is my all-time favorite horror remake, and if I wanted to venture into trying to speak a little objectively, it is probably the single greatest horror remake ever made, just from a few technical standpoints. So before we dive really into this, I want to throw out a couple honorable mentions for some great horror remakes. The Hills Have Eyes, I think, is a good remake.
Decent.
Like, it's not, the greatest. It's not in my top.
No, I agree with you.
25 horror films or anything, but it's a decent enough remake. I can't think of any others right off the top of my head. I wasn't crazy about the Texas Chainsaw Massacres, so
I've got a solid one, guys. If you want to see another exceptional remake, which is a meta remake of its original film, that is The Town That Dreaded Sundown. And the reason it is a meta remake is it sort of is like Scream 2 in a way, where in Scream you have the movie Stab, which is about the Scream murders existing within the Scream universe. The same with The Town Dreaded Sundown is it is a movie that picks up years and years later after the first movie existed, and they actually have the characters in the movie watching a film about the murders that occurred. So it's a very meta remake, but it is exceptionally well done, and highly, highly recommend it. The original and the sequel.
Yep. So you want to dive into some of the key points of the Maniac remake, and then we'll kind of touch on some of the things, what I mean by it's technically, from a technical standpoint, one of the best remakes ever made.
I would be honored to do so, Justin. So some of the key points, guys, that we absolutely love about this film is the soundtrack, first and foremost, sets the overall tone and the atmosphere. Like, if you don't know this movie, go check out the soundtrack. If you don't have time to watch the film offhand, the score is just, for lack of a better word, it's fucking rad. And it's by this guy that goes by Rob. He's a French artist, and it just has this 80s synth electronic sound to it. I don't know how to say it. It's just fucking dark, and it just puts the mood and the environment gets you in the right mind space for the ride that this movie is going to take you on. So definitely check out that. That is like one of the major key points of this. So this is also more believable than the original. So let's talk about why this is more believable than the original. The original, both deals with our main character, Frank Zito. He has mannequins, right? So in the original, it never really delves into why this guy has mannequins. It just kind of, he just is weird, right? He's got mannequins. So in the remake, Elijah Wood actually goes in a little bit into the story without creating too much of a backstory and ruining the character. And, he talks about how his mother or his parents had a mannequin shop and he inherited it, and that's why he has all these mannequins, and he likes to restore them and sell them off to highest bidders and stuff like that for fashion shoots or whatever the fuck these people want to use them for, or that's his excuse when he meets meets this girl in the remake, but he at least has a reason why he has mannequins, because he has a mannequin store. So that makes a little bit more sense, right? Than just being, well, this dude just has fucking mannequins. It's sort of like that. What's that movie, without digressing too much, where the mannequins in the mall come alive and start killing people? It's probably called Mannequin. I don't fucking know. Anyways, yeah, so it's sort of like that.
I'm drawing a blank.
So anyways, so that, and then the way this film is shot is a major key point. So you have the beginning sequence, and you automatically know offhand that it's going to be a little bit different, right? So when you watch the original, it starts off in a first-person point of view, as it starts with Joe Spinell like kind of scanning the beach, right? Isn't that how the original starts out? He's like looking through one of those diopter type things, and so it starts off in a first-person point of view, but then it quickly jumps to your third-person point of view. Now this one, the remake with Elijah Wood, it stays in that first-person point of view for 98% of the film. And the only time it detracts from that first-person point of view is to show emotion that Elijah Wood is conveying in certain situational scenes where you need to see that emotion, like after he does a kill, so you can see the gratification he's getting out of it. So moving
right,
from
which
that,
a lot of times though they still don't even take out a first person, because they utilize mirrors a lot.
Yes,
for his reactions.
Right.
So, I mean, some things I want to touch on. The reason that I think this remake works so well compared to other remakes that have just fallen flat, is, first of all, most remakes, the reason I don't personally like them, and I feel like a lot of the horror community doesn't like them, is because you've got these intellectual properties like Michael Myers, Freddy, Jason, Chucky, and they're so iconic that if you start changing things, like changing a mask or their name, or changing their backstory or the setting or anything like that, you start risking not staying true to the original story. Like, I understand it's a remake, but you go and start changing things and it's not what people are familiar with. Maniac, on the other hand, the original, it isn't rooted in the identity, of the villain through a mask or a name or anything like that. But it is centered around, it's like your typical person with psychological trauma. This person could be anyone that you encounter in real life. So this allowed the remake to move more freely with the character and kind of stray from the original without much risk of criticism, right? So if you look at Joe Spinell and Elijah Wood, they are nothing like each other, physically or acting wise, but it works.
Yeah, for sure. So, with that a little bit, Justin, the acting, right? So Joe Spinell, we already talked about, was pretty great. Like, Elijah Wood all around is now he's becoming, or has become over the last, really 5 to, almost the last decade, right? 5 to 10 years, he's becoming a household name in the horror community. Like, he's doing a lot of stuff in horror, with like his company Spectre Vision, is producing some horror films and some horror episodic type shows, right? So not only is he an all-around actor that we've all known and grown up with because he's been in major films, but he's also spanning across horror, and his horror knowledge is there. So like when you hear him talk or you watch interviews with Elijah Wood talking about horror, the man knows what he's talking about, right? So it's not like it's a strange role for him to play. It was maybe strange for people that didn't know that he had this horror mindset, but now, like, now that you know how he is, this makes all the sense in the world, right? And
right. Well, I mean, seeing him come from Lord of the Rings and then do something like this role is definitely
It's a shocker.
A shocker.
Yeah, it's a shocker for people that are like just strictly into like fantasy movies. So if I was to show this to like some peers that I know that aren't into horror, and it's like, hey, look at this. Here's Frodo Baggins. They would be like, what the hell is he doing in a movie like that, right? But like to me and you, it makes sense, right? But yeah, a lot of people, they would be like, what the hell is going on? And but he was excellent in this role. You know, if you look at the two roles, you know, Joe Spinell played the character a little different, and Elijah Wood, you know, played it. I want to say Joe Spinell gave more sort of like an intense performance, right? And he was more of like, okay, this is sort of like a deranged killer, you know. But Elijah Wood's character was more like, this is more like a subdued guy, and he really sold like the possible mental illness aspect, right? Because that was definitely going on in the original, but in this one you could see it more, right? Portrayed through Elijah Wood and through the writing, right? That like, okay, I've got mommy issues, right? Like you could see that in the first one because that definitely was brought up, but in this one you're like, man,
right?
You feel
that's the whole point of, you know, the whole you're staying home with me tonight,
right?
Because, you know, in the original, his mom, you know, he lost her in a car crash because she went out, and of course in the remake it's the same kind of deal, only his mom was, you know, doing some super inappropriate things in front of him, and she was
a
basically
sex worker.
telling him and you know, he's got to stay in the closet, and so he's witnessing all these things, and so the loss of the mom really plays a factor. And so that's the thing. They keep that. They keep the origin, but they change it enough to where you've still got the basics there, but it's different enough to where it's a fresh take on the story.
Right. You know, and you know, with Joe Spinell, I mean, he definitely held his own. Like, I love the original. Do not get me wrong on that. But I think that I much prefer, if I had to only watch one, I would watch the remake. And not only visually, I thought it was shot better, but, you know, it's a different time. You know, things have gotten better over the years for, you know, horror and having accessible to certain, you know, actors and budgets and all that. I mean, of course we had our heyday in the 80s too, but I mean, you know, like now things are easier, right, for horror. So in the original you had special effects done by Tom Savini, which is why it was so fucking awesome, right? But then, you know, even in the remake you had they kept to a lot of practical effects, Justin. So that's why it really helped, you know, sell it, you know, because they could have gave us some cheap, just, you know, dollar store crap when it came to the scalping, you know, some CGI type crap, but they stuck to a lot of, you know, practicals. And I really, really respect them for that, because not only did they take the hard way by doing that first person point of view cinematography, but they also took the hard way by doing a lot of these practical effects too. So, you know, it's a big testament to the filmmakers there.
Yeah. I also want to touch on, you know, the reason that I feel like this one is, you know, if I agree, if I had to choose, I would probably watch this one. But it's because the whole thing's in a point of view shot, which, again, we've talked about a little, you know, you'd think would get old, but it never does. It's beautifully shot. The transitions are well done. The segments where it shows you his reactions are well done. Like, all the shots are very well planned. But I want to touch on some of this. You know, we can move away to more of like the changing of the time, right? The original was very much rooted in the late 70s, early 80s, and a lot of horror remakes, if they change the time period, it just kind of takes you out of it, because they stress too much, like, oh, well, now there's the internet and the phones and all of this. This film does include those things, but not in a way that takes you out of it. For me, I feel like, you know, so the original, you've got Joe Spinell, who's playing this guy with the mummy issues, and he's killing women, and he's taking their scalps and taking them home and putting them on mannequins. And he meets a photographer, but she's like a fashion model photographer, right? And this, the remake, Elijah Wood is doing the same things Joe Spinell's doing, but he still meets a photographer, but she photographs mannequins, and she does like, art exhibits with them. So it's updating it, but not changing it to a point where you can't see the original in it. By doing some crazy shit like, oh, well, this is taking place 40 years after the original does, so everything's completely different. We're just using the name.
Right. They're not straying
just
too
to sell
far.
the movie.
They're not straying too far, and they're not because this hits right dead in the center. Just to drive home your point, like, so you have remakes that they're going to stray too far from the original story, that they just completely change everything, and you're like, why didn't they just write their own movie? It would have been a lot better if they would have just written their own movie instead of just using the characters from the originals to fill seats. Because I feel like that's what a lot of remakes do, right? They will say, oh,
right.
They
throw the name on to sell a ticket,
right? Okay, so you have that end of the spectrum, and then you also have like the Gus Van Sant Psycho remake, where it was a shot-for-shot bullshit-ass remake that should have never been made, and it's like literally you're getting the same watered-down ass story. You're getting a dollar store version of the good story that you once got. So you're either too far sticking to the same thing and just blatantly ripping it off, or you're straying too far where you're just literally just trying to steal the good parts and make your own shit when you should have just made your own story. But Maniac 2012 is right there in the middle, right where it takes the best of both worlds, and that's one of the main reasons why it works. Like you said, you're getting all the same story elements, but just polished a little better, right? Just to where it makes more sense.
Fresh enough to where you don't want to say, oh, I've already seen the original. Like, I know what happens. I don't need to see this. Like, there's enough freshness to where you're like, I want to see this film. And that's both included in, a couple of the modernizations, and then the change in the way it's filmed, like the decision to make it point of view. And some, of the effects are a little more gory in the remake. There's no exploding head, but you see more. So in the original, you see Joe Spinell like start to scalp the women, and this, like, there are scenes where you straight up see him rip the scalp off.
Right.
So there are elements that are new, but they're not so far removed from the original that you're like, this is bullshit.
Right, for sure. You know what, Justin? You know what this makes me think of? I wonder if in about like 8 years' time we could make remake Veronica.
We should remake Veronica because here's the thing. This is my key. This is why I think Maniac works. Because if you are going to remake a film, if you can't do it better than the original, or you don't do it better than the original, then you shouldn't remake it. And as far as Veronica goes, we would have to purposely try not to make it better than the original. So I think us remaking it would be just fine.
Justin, James, what if we shot a Veronica remake, all in first person point of view?
But then you never get to see the nipple eyeballs.
You do. You get to see them in first person. You're not from the eye of her. You're from the eye of the
oh shit,
the Guaro guy.
Oh my god.
You know what I mean?
No, dude.
Yes.
POV shot from the nipples.
Listen, you write it. I'm 100% in. Glenn Danzig.
We've got this. Glenn Danzig, call us. We need the rights.
What's up? All right, Justin. So, so let's real quick. I want to touch on. I want to touch on a little bit about what your favorite scene is. I want you to tell me what your favorite scene is from the original and what your favorite scene is from the remake. I think this is what we need to start doing in this portion of our main event here. That way we can let people know what it is that we like. And if they're watching this on YouTube, I would love to know what your favorite scene is from the main event that we're talking about. So, Justin?
Right. Oh, okay. So we've got exactly about a minute and a half before we're going to cut to our last segment and answer questions. So I'm going to speed through these. So my favorite scene from the original is probably the subway scene, just because the suspense there is really well done. And she's hiding in the bathroom stall, and he actually comes in, and then makes her think that he left. And then she comes out, and she's like washing her face in the sink, and then it's like, boom, there he is. And I hope I scared you guys.
You scared me. All right.
Okay, well, there we go.
So my favorite scene from the original, guys, we talked about it already, is Disco Boy head explode. One of my favorite kill scenes of all time.
Great scene, beautiful shot. Okay, so I think my favorite scene from the remake is... this is going to be a tough one. Oh, okay. Actually, I know this might be a little cliche, but oh well. So both films end the same way. The mannequins come to life in his mind and tear him to pieces. So the remake ends with them ripping Elijah Wood's face off. It's now no longer first person, and you see them rip his face off to reveal that a mannequin head of Elijah Wood. That's definitely my favorite shot.
Such a sick scene. So my favorite scene is when he goes back to the apartment of Red Lucy 86, and that whole scene where they start making love, and it has a lot of cool camera sequences where you see him lay back on the bed and she has a mirror above her bed, and you see him for one of the first times break that first, well, it doesn't break first person, but for one of the first times you actually see a full body shot of him in the movie, and then just how he goes and he ends up killing that character, Red Lucy 86, and the intensity behind that whole scene is just super gnarly.
And it is that time of the night. It is sleaze mail time. So, Andrew, what you got?
All right, Justin. So I've got 3 pretty solid questions from 3 pretty rad people. So, first question comes from a Hunter Beatty. Hunter asks, have you ever regretted watching a horror film? If so, what film was it? So, Justin, for this section, I would like for you to have the first answer, and I will take second on this one. So,
okay, this is actually pretty easy for me. So, there was a little film. This isn't the answer, but it's leading there. There's a little film by the name of Thanksgiving. It has actually become somewhat of a tradition. I watch it at least once every November. It's about a killer turkey.
Classic.
A holiday classic. It's about a killer turkey. Yeah, you heard that right. So, the problem is that there is no Thanksgiving 2, at least from what I understand, but there is a Thanksgiving 3. And I watched this in its entirety. There are like space creatures, a talking worm, a like Muppet look-alike kind of character, and it is terrible. It's supposed to be like some comedy meta horror kind of thing, but it's just bad. So yeah, that's my answer. Thanksgiving 3.
So you regret it because it's terrible?
I regret it. Yes, it's terrible, and it just makes me, now when I watch Thanksgiving, I can't see it as for what Thanksgiving is supposed to be, just a goofy, like, funny kind of horror film. Now I see it as, well, this was the precursor to Thanksgiving 3.
This is the precursor. This is symptom number 1.
Yeah.
It gets worse from here. So, yeah. Yeah, so Justin, I've never seen Thanksgiving 3. He is simultaneously sending me screenshots of it, and I have to say I am not interested in it whatsoever. But
not
my
even
answer,
to figure out what's going on in the
no, I do not give a flying fuck about what's going on in that movie.
Go waste your own $5.
Go waste your own $5. So my answer here, Justin, is if you've ever seen Kevin Smith's Tusk.
I have seen Tusks.
So
Tusks.
I 100% regret watching Tusk. Now, Kevin Smith, brilliant man in his own right. Tusk, I understand what we were doing here in this movie. I understand the whatever it is he's doing, the whole North series of demented creature features or whatever the fuck it is. It's not that the movie was a terrible movie per se, but I will tell you this. Ever since watching Tusk, I have not been able to look at a walrus the same.
Or Justin Long.
Or him. Justin Long. Yes, the main character of the film, the one that gets turned into the walrus creature. I 100% totally regret watching that movie. It makes me feel disgusting to see him turning into the walrus. It makes me feel so disgusting to even look at walruses. Like, literally, my wife, my son, and I were watching... it was Planet Earth or Blue Planet or one of those, and it was an episode on walruses.
You had
I was
PTSD.
like, guys, I was like, I gotta get the fuck up out of this room. Like, I cannot, like...
I don't regret watching Tusk. I regret watching its sequel,
guys,
Yoga Hosers.
Yeah, I won't even watch that one. But guys, I am an animal... I'm pretty much an animal advocate. I'm vegetarian. Not that fucking matters. But I will straight up fucking punch a walrus. I will punch a walrus. I do not fuck around. Do not bring them around me. I don't want to go to the zoo. If I see a walrus at the zoo, I'm going to lose my shit. Fuck a walrus. Anyways, let's move to the second question.
So what
Justin.
you're telling me is PETA stands for punching extremely tusked animals.
What the fuck?
This is the quality content you guys came here for.
Yeah, but...
Oh man.
Well, see, if PETA did stand for that, then I would think of them as a notable organization. But you know what? Motherfuck PETA too.
Yeah.
And so let's go to our second question, Justin, before we insult everything. And that is from Schaefer. So Schaefer asks, she says, I am really curious of what y'all think about the movie Zombie Strippers. Besides that, are there any films that y'all think have aged horribly? Films y'all think are treasures, no matter how old they are? It's a threefold question, bro.
I got this. So, as far as the first part, Zombie Strippers, I have not seen that. But after receiving this question, it is on my list of things to watch. So, we will revisit that in a later episode within the next couple of weeks for sure. So, let's see. Besides that, are there any films that y'all think aged horribly? We've talked about this a little bit before actually, starting the episode, and there's things like Chopping Mall and stuff like that are basically, it only didn't age well because they were so rooted in the goofiness of the time. So you've got these like killbots that are programmed to keep burglars from, shoplifting or breaking into the mall or whatever, and they're chasing these teenagers around. So it's just very cheesy. But stuff like that, I can't think of anything really specific because I actually personally love Chopping Mall. So it is just goofy and cheesy though. So probably, I don't know.
If I had to think of a movie, Justin, that I would like to remake, I think there's two films on my list that I personally would love to remake. I think Chopping Mall would be a fun one.
I'd be definitely down for that.
And I think one of my all-time favorite horror movies, I don't want to say all-time favorite, but it is definitely up there in the top 20, but I thought it was such a fucking solid movie that suffers from being a victim to circumstance of the time period it was released in, and that is Driller Killer. I love Driller Killer.
Oh my God.
I would love to remake that. Like, that is... I want to remake Driller Killer.
I would definitely be down to remake Driller Killer. Driller Killer... so here's our list of remakes we have to make. Driller Killer, Verotica, Chopping Mall, and since we're talking about Driller Killer and stuff like that, we can do Slumber Party Massacre.
And I want to make the 14th Puppet Master film.
Oh my God, Puppet Master.
So how about this last section of the question? Film that you think, Justin, are treasures no matter how old they are.
Well, for me, there is the obvious answer, if anyone knows me. But I'm going to try not to give that. So the obvious answer would be Halloween. 1978 John Carpenter classic, got me into filmmaking, period. But films that I think are treasures, no matter how old they are. Let's think of really old films. So I'm going to have to go with Vertigo. Because the cinematography in Vertigo is what really turned me on to more of the technical aspects of filmmaking.
It's a brilliant movie.
So if you haven't seen Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, what the fuck? But
what the fuck are you doing?
And that one hits with me anyway because I have a fear of heights. So go check out Vertigo. So for my take on this question, Zombie Strippers, again, I have not seen it, Schaefer. Thanks for the recommendation. We are going to watch it, and that is going to be on the tip top of my list to watch before next episode. At the tit top.
And the tippity top, and I'll let you know our thoughts in the next podcast. Films I think that have aged horribly. that would be the Puppet Master series. Those were super rad as a kid because I was like, oh man, this is cool, like look at these puppets. But now you go back and you watch them and you're like, like what, like what the hell? It's like when you go back and you watch Child's Play. I mean, Chucky was scary. Chucky, I understand why he can kill people. He's a doll. Everybody's like, well, why don't you just go kick the doll? It's like, well, Puppet Master, they're even smaller, right? You have the little like cowboys and shit like that going around killing people, and no, it just hasn't aged well. And like I said, there's like 13 of them, so I think they incrementally get worse as they go on. So I think those have aged pretty poorly. And a treasure that I like that is super old, guys, is I am a big fan of like the like Hammer Studios and the old Universal monsters. So any of those I really love. I sit down and I watch those annually, right? I will go through and I said annually too, not anally. And I will watch those years. I mean, I can do both, but I watch those every year, and whether it's Boris Karloff or you're looking at Bela Lugosi or any of those guys, right? So any of those guys from that time period, you're gonna have a good time watching those movies. They're more of like a theatrical play than they are like a modern day horror film. So they're normally over dramatized, and I just love those. Dracula, The Mummy, the original White Zombie, any of those films.
Any of the Lon Chaney classics too.
Lon Chaney, how can I forget Lon Chaney? Phantom of the Opera, like any of those, amazing. So yeah. All those are treasures near and dear to my heart.
Yep.
All right. So the last question comes from Charles Chuck Stone.
Well, I've got one more after this. So.
Okay. Well, then we've got 4 questions.
Yep.
So Charles asks, he says, 2 questions. Real quick, what makes a horror film worthy of being rated an awesome movie? And then with the technology of today and the big budgets, what old horror from like the 70s and 80s would be a much better film? Justin?
Okay, so what makes a horror film worthy of being rated an awesome movie? Well,
in terms of elements, I think is what he's asking.
Right.
So what quantifies it for you?
Well, the story is always king. I have to care about the characters, because if I'm watching a film and the characters are just kind of like bland, or I don't have a reason to root for them, then there's no real impact on me if they die or anything like that. So a solid story, a reason to care about the characters. And then, of course, you got to have cool kills, right? You can't just have, last episode we talked about how Rob Zombie does like the same 2 or 3 kills every time. That's what I miss about the 80s slasher films. Like, as simple as it was literally almost, you could sit down and write and say, okay, you got a group of kids. They're all going to die except one. So now basically we're just going to come up with a unique way for each of them to die, right? So the classic slashers had certain kills. I don't want, the gore doesn't have to be over the top. I just want unique kills,
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see. With technology today and big budgets, what old horror film from the 70s and 80s would be a much better film?
So what would be like we talked about Driller Killer would be advantageous if they would make a remake of it, because it was sort of like a victim to the times it was in. It was like, looks underfunded. It looks like it did not give enough credit to where the story was due. What kind of film like that, Justin, do you think would be worth a remake?
Chud.
I
would definitely be down for a Chud remake. I mean, it's not that film was bad, but I just feel like with today, you've got so many more just options with special effects, so you can make the creatures maybe a little cooler. But that's just me loving Chud and wanting a remake. But in all seriousness, what old horror? So I mean, honestly, I can't think of any right off the bat. Like maybe if I was watching something, I could. But I definitely, this, ties in with what we talked about in this episode. Maniac, given the technology and a bigger budget, was able to pull off a fantastic remake. But as far as like anything specific right now, I can't really think of anything, because there's a lot of the films that I feel like could benefit from a remake with a bigger budget, but necessarily they might fall into, what I was talking about with Maniac. The reason it worked so well is because it was able to avoid some of these traps with the remake. And there's so many that, even though they could benefit from, better technology, they might suffer in other areas with, the intellectual properties and stuff like that.
I've got one for you, Justin, and you may actually agree with me on this. I love this movie, and it's the same like with Driller Killer. This is a movie that I personally, if I was to go into, or me and Justin, Black Mass Films, were to go into remaking horror films, of course Driller Killer would be in there. Exceptional movie, like I mentioned, but this one as well, Justin, from 1979, Tourist Trap. I love Tourist Trap.
I haven't watched that in forever.
So it's a David Schmoller film, and this is another one. It stars, Chuck Connors, which was a big name at the time, right? He did a lot of stuff. So he was sort of like the star in this one. But so Tourist Trap essentially is a group of young friends stranded at a secluded roadside museum are stalked by a masked assailant who uses his telekinetic powers to control the attraction's mannequins. So this is a movie that when you watch, it's great. It's completely out of this world, what you're watching. And like I said, it's from the 70s. So again, it's in sort of that grindhousey type period where it's real gritty, and it's just kind of, I don't know, you could tell it was underfunded. And I think that if this ever had a remake and it was done correctly, not that the original wasn't, but if the remake itself was done correctly, sort of how the Maniac remake was done, I think it would open up a brand new audience for the original to go back and appreciate the original as well as the remake. So Tourist Trap is my answer. If you haven't seen it, it's from 1979. It's weird as fuck, and it's definitely a testament to like horror in the late 70s. You need to see it if you haven't.
All right, so our last question comes from Jesse. I know Jesse personally. He's a really awesome dude. Thanks for the question. Thanks for supporting the podcast. So his question is, what film or films do you think have the best practical effects in the horror genre? Okay, so this question, there's so many awesome effects, practical effects, that I don't want to just pick one film. I'm going to call off a couple of my favorite practical effect moments in horror films. So first, probably one of the most memorable to me practical effects is Tina's death from A Nightmare on Elm Street. Actually, there's just a lot of scenes in the original Nightmare on Elm Street that are really awesome. Some other things I can think of. So the head exploding scene in Scanners. And my all-time favorite probably, though, would be the chest burster scene in Alien. So, there's so many awesome practical effects out there, especially like the 80s and the 70s. You had Tom Savini and Greg Nicotero, Greg Nicotero is still doing a lot of stuff today, right? But definitely the 80s were the heyday for practical effects. So those are some of my favorite picks. Andrew?
Yes, this question I absolutely love, Justin, and there are three major ones that stick out to me. So, number one, and my favorite, we'll start with this one and we'll go down from there. I have three that I'm going to give you. So, number one is the full moon transformation from An American Werewolf in London.
Yes, I was gonna put that on my list, but then I was just like, I was all about some gore, but
it's almost too easy of an answer.
Dive into this, yeah,
so
it's a really great shot.
So in 1981's American Werewolf in London, it is a werewolf movie, and it shows a full-on from human to werewolf transformation. And this was done by visual effects artist Rick Baker. And he was awarded the first Academy Award for Best Makeup and Hairstyling. Did you know that for this? And yeah, amazing shot, amazing scene. Side note, if you ever are on Shudder or any other platform and you see the movie Wolf Cop, there's also an amazing werewolf transformation scene in that movie as well. I'm not going to spoil it for you. It happens in a restroom. Go watch that. But American Werewolf in London's number 1. Number 2.
They did that with reverse cinematography.
They
for
did.
those of you who don't know.
Yeah.
They basically like put, a lot of like hair fibers through this material, and they filmed them pulling it through and then played that in reverse in the edit, and it looks like the hair is coming back through the holes, so it looks like his hair is growing.
Amazing just how smart it was, the techniques they used to do that, and it just confused everybody at the time, like how the hell did they do this? They pulled it off masterfully. It's great. So definitely check that out if you haven't seen it, or just YouTube that scene, but I highly recommend watching the full movie. Also, The Blood Geyser, A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984.
Yep.
To where the blood is coming out of the bed and shoots up all over the ceiling. True fact
Rip
about
Johnny
that.
Depp.
Yeah, true fact about that is they actually shot that upside down, and they were just pouring blood out of the bed. So it was a set piece. The bed and all that was actually on the ceiling. They were pouring blood down through the bed to flood the ceiling, which was effectively the floor. Amazing scene. And then my last one, Justin, number 3, is from Peter Jackson's best movie he's ever made, and that is
Better be his first movie.
Dead Alive from 1992, the lawnmower attack scene. If you have not seen it, that is the one thing you need to do this weekend. Grab your children, grab your wife, grab your neighbors, show them the lawnmower attack scene from
They're
Dead
mowing
Alive.
everybody out here.
Yeah, we're showing everybody out here the lawnmower attack scene from Dead Alive 1992. Go watch it and have a different perspective on life after you've seen it.
And a very different perspective on Peter Jackson.
Peter Jackson's best film to date. Those are my 3 answers.
Yeah, these are all solid answers, I think. So that is going to wrap up this episode. If you guys have any questions you want answered in an episode, you can check us out. We now have a Twitter for the podcast, which is Cinema Creep Pod, at Cinema Creep Pod on Twitter. Or, you can find Black Mass Films at Black Mass Films on Twitter and Instagram. Or if you guys find us on Facebook or our personal Instagrams, my Instagram is HorrorDad13. You want to give yours a shout?
Yeah. Across all social media, guys, I am Drew X Cipher. That's Drew Cipher, like Lucifer, DREWXCIFER, across everywhere.
Yeah, so if you want to reach out to us on Twitter or Instagram, my Instagram and Twitter are both at HorrorDad13. Or again, check out Drucifer or Cinema Creep Pod on Twitter, and just hit us with your questions, reviews, comments, whatever you guys want to do. And as always, thanks for listening. Stay creepy, and we will see you guys next week.
See ya.